Welcome to the program. My name is Tamara Rosevan. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko visited Washington this month, meeting with U.S. leaders on the sidelines of the Nuclear Security Summit. Joining us in the studio to discuss the key messages and goals of the visit is Borys Tarasyuk. He's a former Foreign Affairs Minister of Ukraine. Welcome to the program.
Nice to be here.
So there's been reports that Poroshenko's visit to Washington has been largely to seek approval from top U.S. officials of candidates for the General Prosecutor's office. Now, do you think this is accurate?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. The reason why I am of this opinion, because this is not in the, so to say, in the practice of the U.S. policy. And this was confirmed by the current U.S. Ambassador Pyatt, who recently said that the U.S. is not caring about the names. The U.S. is caring about the functioning of the officials.
And whether they're reform-minded.
And whether they are reform-minded. So in short, I would say that, of course, the U.S. administration was expecting from visiting President Poroshenko the information about the internal situation in Ukraine. Of course, they were discussing, and President Poroshenko shared his views on how the political situation is being developed in Ukraine. Of course, they were discussing the issue of Russian aggression against Ukraine. Of course, they were discussing the issue of sanctions against Russia. And many other things, but I have serious doubts whether on the highest U.S. level there was such issue or discussion about the names.
I see. But also on the agenda had been potentially, there were reports of this, that the governing coalition, that at that point, that when Poroshenko would be visiting Washington, that a governing coalition would have been formed in the Ukrainian parliament, but it failed to do so.
Yes, and I read carefully the speech by President Poroshenko in the forum in the Congress forum. The fight of Ukraine for freedom continues. So this was informal forum where President Poroshenko spoke, and he said that he expects that the coalition, the new coalition, will be formed in Kyiv this week. So the week is about to be over. There is no coalition, no new government, and most probably the negotiations and consultations between the factions in the parliament will continue next week.
I see. During his visit, the New York Times published an editorial where it's quite critical of the president and the current Ukrainian government, and it talks about Ukraine's unyielding corruption. Other media outlets have also reported that top U.S. officials weren't so keen to meet Poroshenko during the visit. How do you think the U.S.'s perception of Ukraine's government has changed over the years?
Well, I think that the outgoing President Obama did not make any breakthrough in relationship with Ukraine. And if want to compare the attitude of different U.S. administrations, I would say that the administration of Democrat Bill Clinton did the most in developing Ukraine-U.S. relationship. So they were not very active, and the interest was low under the Republican administrations. And we do hope that with the new president-elect of the United States, there will be much more interest in Ukraine. But from my point of view, the critical mood in the New York Times article and different mass media, so they are of no strength, because us Ukrainians are quite critical about the president, about the government and Prime Minister Yatsenyuk. So this is not something, you know, which a paper is opening Ukraine.
So there's nothing new. You didn't find anything new in the article.
Only I would say that one should not use in articles language like instructions. You should do this, this, and this. This is not the language the journalists should, you know, have. But nevertheless, the president, of course, he might have been much more eager to go to the United States and to inform about, you know, a good political situation in Ukraine, about our successes in economy, in fighting corruption. But unfortunately, there is not that much, you know, for him
to report on, potentially.
To talk about.
So a critical article, but at the same time, the U.S. has pledged over $330 million US. This was reported by Washington, that Biden has promised this to Ukraine. Now, do you think that this shows the U.S.'s confidence, potentially, in Ukraine?
Well, there is no other choice for the U.S. Than to have the confidence in Ukraine, because Ukraine is the only country which is fighting the third largest military power in the world, and quite successfully. And the difference for the U.S. Officials is that either to have good relationship with the aggressor, Russia, or to have a good relationship with the country which is a victim of aggression and which is fighting for the same values which are prevailing in the U.S.
So you believe that the U.S. has two options, either supporting Ukraine or supporting Russia?
No, this was not my message. My message was that Ukraine is expecting the support and more active support from the U.S. administration that it is currently being done. For example, the U.S. Congress approved some $350 million for the military assistance to Ukraine, including lethal weapons, but the White House is refusing from doing so. So this is the problem of the internal U.S., so to say, issue in the power structures.
Well, the U.S. believes that this will provoke Russia into a more aggressive stance. The U.S. and Russia are already at Cold War era levels of relations, so this might provoke Russia more, providing Ukraine with lethal weapons.
My assessment is that under the current president in Washington, the U.S. has lost its leading position and leading role in global affairs, and the issue of Russian aggression, not only in Ukraine and against Ukraine, but in Syria as well, is demonstrating that Russia is becoming more and more aggressive, and the White House has nothing to, to present to oppose this aggressive mood of Russia.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about potentially the future of Ukraine-U.S. relations. On November 8th, over 100 million Americans will be voting for the next president of the United States. Now, how should Ukraine go about forming a cooperation with the next president of the United States?
Well, partly President Poroshenko answered to this question by saying that there is a need to activate Ukrainian-U.S. strategic partnership, which is formally exists. And I think that this cannot be put into one or two sentences. This is a multifaceted, kind of relationship which, from my point of view, is not yet being filled with the content, with the real content. To my mind, the current U.S. administration is underestimating its position to counter aggressive Russia, and thus losing its global leadership. And this relates to Ukraine directly. We do have the reason to expect more active role of the United States in the conditions when Russia is occupying part of our territory and waging the war on another part of our territory. So the U.S. was much more active when Russia invaded Georgia in 2008. And nothing of a kind was done and demonstrated 2 years ago when Russia started the war against Ukraine. So, and this is yet another factor and indicator that U.S. is losing its leading position in the world.
I see. Very interesting discussion today. Thank you so much for joining me in the studio.
Thank you.
This has been Borys Tarasyuk. He is a former Foreign Affairs Minister of Ukraine. You've been watching Viewpoint on Ukraine Today.